And so I'd like to invite the final panel to come on up here, and last panel's a discussion on small business strategies for growth and success, and we have a great group of panelists to come up here. I'd like to introduce, I'll bring up Ken Zippin as well, and I'll have him introduce the panelists. And Ken, for those of you who don't know him, he's a Program Vice President for General Dynamics Health Solutions, and has been in this industry for over 20 years, specifically over 10 within the health and human services market, and obviously is a huge advocate also of the small business community. So I welcome Ken, and thank you. Come on up. Let's get this going here. Here's yours, Ken. Here's yours, Antoine. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for sticking around for the last session here. And we'll try to keep it short and snappy since happy hour is right after this. Everybody wants to do that. We're just going to start out and do a quick introduction. I'll just let folks spend a few minutes talking about who they are and who they represent in their companies or agency, and maybe you can give us a little background and share with us about that. So why don't I start on the end? And why don't you introduce yourself, and we'll go this way.
Absolutely. I'm Bob Nunley. I'm the president and COO of the Ambit Group. We were founded 13 years ago as a service-disabled, veteran-owned, woman-owned small business. We're no longer a small business. We're in the early stages of becoming that euphemistic term of other than small. But it's coming at the end of about the execution of about a 3-year strategy. Specific strategy to make that leap forward. We deliver IT services, management, and O&M types of services, mostly across the civilian sector, even though we're a service-disabled founded company, mostly across the services. Our services are on the civilian sector side of the house.
Please.
Good afternoon. My name is Antoine Ford, President and CEO of Enlighten Incorporated. We started around 99-2000. We are specializing in a lot of system integration work, analytics, cyber, and management consulting. We graduated from the 88 program a long time ago, 2009. We are nearing the stage of almost out of small, so we are going through our second year of our strategy of the infamous stage of too big to be small and too small to be big. But we have working with that. We are, this year was the first year we have actually become a DoD mentor. So we are one of 2 or 3 small businesses that is actually a DoD mentor. Our protege is out of NSA. We were a protege once of HP EDS, and so we'll talk more about that later.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Watson. I work in the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization at the Department of Treasury. Part of my roles and responsibility is I serve as the program manager for vendor outreach, and I also serve as the program manager for our vendor outreach program. One of the things that I particularly am interested within my roles and responsibilities is that I noticed that a lot of the small businesses, particularly the IT firms, can I just see by a show of hands how many IT firms are? Okay, good. Yeah, so most of the IT firms, when they look at our forecasting opportunities, sometimes they come away and they say, Brian, I didn't see anything that I could directly apply for, but I got this product and service that's wonderful. I know if I can get to your CIO, I know I can turn some heads. So one of the things that I do is I kind of partner with our CIO, engage with their office, and find out who's who within the CIO office. And if you can present to me a product or service that we're maybe not be in the market for, but if you can present a need within Treasury, a lot of times I'll try to help you out and get you to the right program person. And that normally does it's a great help to the small business. So, and I think that's it for me.
Great, thanks. All right, so the way we're going to do this is I'll ask some starter questions. The panel will have a discussion, but especially given we're at the end of the day, if you guys have something that you want to talk about or if something up here interests you, feel free to stop, wave your hand. I'll try to get my attention. I'll try to call on you. We can sort of make it a little bit more interactive, or we'll try to save a little time at the end for questions. So I sent the panel questions ahead of time that I intended to ask, but I'm going to call an audible and ask you a different question.
Omaha.
Yeah, Omaha, right. And the reason for that is I looked out on you had a question board out there where folks could write questions or things, and I stole the questions. So if anybody's looking for them, they're here. But I noticed the small businesses in particular, I guess it's a yellow color, or maybe it's green, had a sort of a theme to them, and I was wondering if the panel could address that theme, since that seemed to be a hot topic. And there's a question here about how do you get customer intimacy without having a prime contract. There's a question about, well, how do I learn about opportunities? How do I know what's coming up? Another question as far as getting in front of opportunities. So it seems like sort of there's a theme about, well, I've got my small business, I sort of know what my capabilities are, but Department of Treasury, DHS, CMS, whatever, they're huge agencies. How do I learn about what's happening and how do I get in front of those? So I thought from the perspective of a couple smalls, maybe you could address how do you learn about that and how do you get in front of those things? And particularly, Brian, maybe you can talk about some of the outreach that's available to small businesses. So why don't you
right,
take
so
us
I can
off?
get started. So as the program manager for Treasury's Vendor Outreach, we normally have 9 sessions a year. And at least 3 of those sessions are specialized sessions in which we invite our IT program managers specifically to the table so that they can speak with small business vendors like yourself. So if you are interested in doing business with the Treasury, you can go out to our website at www.treasury.gov, and it'll open up to a home page, and then you click on our resource link. And once you click on our resource link, it'll bring up 4 small business programs. And I'm going to take the time just to mention each one because I think it's very important. CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution, is one of the programs. SBLF, Small Business Lending Fund, is one. SBCI, Small Business Credit Initiative, is another. And the final one is the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. You should take a peek at each one of those programs. If you cannot provide a service to those programs may be able to provide a service to you. Lending Fund, Credit Initiative. So you might want to take advantage and look at those programs. The final link is the OSDBL. You click on the OSDBL link, and I tell you, it's a wealth of information. I believe we have a state-of-the-art website with just information that will answer all your questions, whether it's mentor, protege, forecasting goals, how to do business with Treasury, how to register for vendor outreach activities, point of contact information for our acquisition staff, small business specialists for the folks that are in my office, the office of OSDBL, so lots of information. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, that if you decide to come to our vendor outreach, it'll be a wonderful opportunity to meet with our small business specialists. We have 6 small business specialists, one from IRS, one from the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, one from Mint, and one from OCC, Office of Comptroller and Currency, and then we have 2 other small business specialists. Those specialists are familiar with what goes on in their bureaus, and they can articulate to you the requirements that they have. You can present your business ideas, and hopefully you can establish a healthy relationship. And the reason why I'm using the word relationship, because that's so important. A lot of times the small businesses come to the table and like, okay, what can Treasury offer me? I'm like, let's flip this. What can you offer the Treasury? And you have a lot to offer the Treasury. You would just have to think about it and present it in a different way. For those small businesses that come to me and say, Brian, we got this neat product and we think it will help improve your business operations. Brian, we got this neat product that we think your CIO office be interested in. Now I'm like, okay, let's hear about it. And then after they tell me about the product, I'm like, well, let me tell you how I can help you, establishing a relationship. So those are just a couple of things I wanted to mention.
Thanks.
You heard the word relationship, and that's absolutely it. And if you're here at this event, you have taken an absolute step. So 2 shameless plugs here. One is for ACT-IAC. because of the relationships you're seeing. But you have to follow up with those. We'll talk about that. Another shameless plug is finding those companies who are looking for you, right? So the Ambit Group started the Ambit Accelerator recently. We had our first group of 5 smalls in yesterday. A couple were micro smalls. So that guy right there, Brett Peffer with the orange tie, come see Brett if you want to talk about becoming a partner with Ambit as we move forward. But really, I think the important element of this is what you just heard is, what is it you can do for someone, but you have to understand what their problem is, right? So whether it's me as a larger company looking for support, right? So engaging me in the relationship, in the conversation, learning something about me. Maybe I don't have a nail, so I don't need a hammer. Maybe I have a screw and I need a screwdriver, right? But having that relationship to understand it. And then the same thing with the federal clients, if indeed that's your target area, is knowing enough about them, right? You can have all kinds of research in the world, but if you, and I know you know this because you're small business owners, and I've been a small business owner too outside of my current job, is that shoe leather work that allows you to build the relationship, to understand what somebody's problem is, and tell them how you can solve it. Then the follow-up part of that is quality is what grows a business. Not just doing stuff. It's the quality of what you're doing. And if you are a quality deliverer, either as a prime or a quality deliverer as a sub, you'll get more work, lots more work.
I think, and they hit critical points. I mean, relationship, I think, is the most critical asset I think any company has in it. And I think if you tie relationships to intelligence, information, I mean, we are fanatical about understanding our customer. I'm seeing Fran, who's a partner out there, and she was once at EDS, and when she was there, one of the things that when we were really small, she was like, well, if we're going to partner, what do you know about that customer? And so if you can't tell me this information, why in the world would I partner with you? Why would I waste bidding proposal dollars? And so, you know, we sort of learned those lessons, and I mean, we will read every IG report, every GAO report, anything that happens to be about that particular agency. We have an internship program. I have my interns, scavenging the world about a particular customer and what issues they have. And so when we get in front of them, we sort of know, here's the problem you had, here's what you testified, here was your problem, and here's what our solution is. And they look at me like, Antoine, that's great. We need this. And so to get in front of it, it's all about making sure that information, which is available, you just got to connect the dots, is there. And the other thing that I think small businesses should take advantage of is beachheads. And we call, no matter how small that contract may be, if I can get a badge and if I'm on site, then I'm in the midst of the belly of the whale, and conversations happen all the time, and somebody will come by, hey, Antoine, do you know anything about this? And sometimes we recommend other folks, other times where, we can't help that. And so no matter how large or small that contract is, if you can get on site and really add value, because you can be on site, if you're not adding value, he's going to kick you out. And so we just have to make sure, I think those things are critically important.
I will say, we call them wedges, where we're able to find out what some problem is. When we had a small status, it was easier to direct award to us, right? Which is a great thing if you have that, or you have a vehicle that they can get to you pretty quickly on with limited competition and that kind of thing. But seriously, understanding their problem well enough to give them a pitch. I would say, I don't know the exact percentage, but I'd say 75% of Ambit's work started with a white paper given to the client where we had done the research. I absolutely believe in GAO reports and IG reports and all those things that people go like, whatever. But if you have seen something in the paper and you have the resources, whether it's an intern or whomever it is, and say, I want you to read this and I want you to give me a one-page summary of this, and then you as an entrepreneur, your ability to go like, oh, I see what they need. And then how do you get it? How do you get the introduction through a partner to someone to whom you can drop a white paper with a 3-page, 2-page, page and a half, a pretty graphic, whatever it is, that says, this is my understanding of your challenge. If I was in your shoes, here's how I think about this. Here's my number.
Excellent. That's some really good tips there. So all three of you talked about the importance of relationships in that answer, right? So why don't we sort of jump over to, well, how do you build those relationships, right? If you want to find those wedges or those beachheads, right, you've got to have some relationships to help get started. So do you guys have any advice in terms of, from your two corporate experiences, and then Brian, maybe you can give us some insight from a government perspective of, what's the right way to approach the client, and how do you make those initial contacts? So you want to kick us off, Antoine?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we saw it was a company called American Management Systems. Anybody remember them? And we first started consulting with them, and at one point, the entire DoD organization was former military individuals. And one of the things we found was, well, we were too small to hire a bunch of generals and full-bird colonels, but we had an advisory board. And so we started an advisory board. We still have one to this day where we hire individuals that have retired, but that still have relationships. I did not serve, but I definitely appreciate everyone that does. And Admiral Nancy Brown, she's a retired 3-star, so when we go into the Navy, I'm walking with her. So when I walk in with her, she immediately validates who I am. And so she opens the door because she understands that I would never violate that trust. But she helps validate and establish that relationship with folks in the Navy and individuals that are on my advisory board. And I think that has been invaluable for us. The other aspect of it, and you mentioned IAC, that has fostered relationships for us, has been being a member of boards of directors. These are individuals. In my case, I was the chair of the board for the DC Chamber of Commerce for a number of years, and other boards that I'm on. And these are relationships that before I was on the board and chaired the board, these people would have never met me in a million years. I was another small business owner. When I became on the board and I chaired the board, it was, hey, Antoine, I need you to help me with this. And so that changed the paradigm a little bit, and that helped with relationships, because it took me out of a view of just another of the 8 million small businesses to a business leader or an industry leader or someone who understands how to solve my problem. So for us, it's been both advisors and then various boards and organizations like that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. It's your business as a small, your business opportunities as a small business owner can't be simply around the target market that you're going to. It's everything else you do, right? There are a lot of funny stories of somebody being at a Little League game, and it turns out that the opposing coach actually is a federal employee who needs something, right? And boom, you're off to the races. So it's all those things you do. I have a very simple mantra that I share with our team all the way up, which is get them to like you, get them to trust you, and never let them down. And so getting them to like you is just that friendly initial relationship, right? That allows them to, after the World Series, one of the first things you're meeting somebody, go like, so are you a happy camper or an unhappy camper, right? And they're like, well, no, man, my team, blah, 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 right? Whatever it is to get those things to kick off, and then allow you the opportunity to serve. And that's another mantra that I think is really important in our business, and especially in the sector we're in, is that every day we're invited to be in that agency, it's an opportunity to serve. It's a welcome mat. We're in their home, and we're there to serve them, right? And serve the missions that we have. And the mission of government is really important to our company. I know it's important to all of us. But if you can get your team to start buying into that, every one of them becomes the person who's actually building potential business relationships for you, right? And to be able to leverage them and grow the environment.
So what do you think, Brian, from a government perspective, what's the best way for a small business person to reach into the government and start establishing those relationships?
Okay, so let me say this. Okay, as part of my responsibilities, I manage a vendor outreach database that consists of more than 1,600 small business vendors, all, of course, who wants to do business with Treasury. So realistically, understand that we're not going to have a relationship with all those individuals. So actually, what I'm looking at when a small business vendor come to the table and they have expert knowledge and they professional and they engage in, I'm looking oftentimes if they can serve as an advisor or maybe an expert person to me when I need of assistance. So the way it works in my mind is if you offer networking services and you presented your idea and I kind of put you in my file, and I may, give you a call up and say, hey, I was thinking about, I'm recommending this product. What you think about it? And basically, I'll be getting from, I guess, someone's perspective. They say, well, that's giving free information. No, it's not. It's developing a relationship. You're helping me out. If I'm calling you once, twice, third time, I'm also remembering who you are. And as soon as the opportunity come forth my way, you're the first person I'm thinking about. Win-win relationship. It's not all about, charging a cost for the service. It's about building that relationship so that you can keep so that I can keep you in mind. The other thing is, and I'll tell a real brief story, I was faced with a challenge where I needed to build a database for our Golden Report. So my supervisor pretty much gave me $6,000 to build a database. I mean, so the first step was, the first step was to call CIO and to see if they could offer the service for me. So I called CIO, and it was like, well, yeah, for, I don't know, $60,000, $70,000, we can build your database. Okay, so I ruled that out. So the next thing, I said, okay, CIO, if I wanted to have a small business come in and build this database, what do I have to do? And they was like, oh, you got to satisfy our security requirement. So they sent me all these requirements from web services and 508 compliance and NIST requirements and FSMA requirements, and he was like, okay, you got to complete this package and send it back to us. I'm like, okay, so how much would this cost after it's all done? About $50,000. So I'm like, okay. So I got $6,000, so I said to myself, if I can get a small business vendor to use Excel application and just develop me something very basic and simple, will that satisfy my need? Yes. So shortly after that, I went to a vendor outreach session, and a small business vendor came up to me and said, Brian, you know what? In the federal government, you know there's a lot of money to be saved, because if you use Access and if you use Excel, instead of, you know, going out building a lot of these fancy, sophisticated, high-end software, in fact, he was like, you could save a whole lot of money. And I'm like, wow. He was thinking the same way I was thinking. How can I get around, you know, all of these sophisticated requirements? How can I use something that we already have in-house to satisfy a basic need? To this day, I remember this guy because he saw a need, I saw a need, he's my friend. So when something comes up, I have him in mind. So what I'm simply saying is that when you go to vendor outreach, or when you introduce yourself to a small business specialist like myself, you might want to keep those things in mind. And in closing, I just want to say that research and the time spent is going to be well worth it, because I know a lot. I used to be a small business owner, and I know some of you all trying to keep the lights on. You're trying to pay the bills. You're trying to pay your employees. I get that. I understand that. I respect that. But at the same time, when you do research and when you find out about the mission of an organization, when you look at their performance annual accountability report, and you find about their goals and their statements and where they're going and where they're at now and the issues that they're having, what happens is now all of a sudden you have insight, and you can start to use that information as you present your idea to the organization. It works. Trust me, it really works. It takes time, it takes research, and it takes a level of effort.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate those answers, because it just shows that relationships, a lot of times when people think about relationships, they think about going out to lunch, getting a meeting, you know, things like that. But relationships is a two-way street, just like Brian articulated, and it's about delivering value, right? And being able to have that ongoing dialogue is really what counts, right? It's not just the lunch, that's fine, but it's really the continuing dialogue. So I appreciate those answers. Those were really good. Along with relationships, though, you know, one aspect of relationship we didn't talk about that I think is really important for small businesses in particular is partner relationships, right? Both with larges and with other small. So I'm wondering if Brian and Antoine, you guys could specifically address, you know, how do you build relationships with those other companies out there, and how do you leverage those to help grow the business?
Okay, well, I'll get started and I'll be brief.
Yeah.
We have a mentor protege program at Treasury. Now, the way it works is normally if you are a prime contractor and you're currently doing business with Treasury, we put you on a list, and a small business look you up, and if they're interested in, you know, serving as a protege to you, you fill out the paperwork and I'll approve off on it, and then you could be part of our mentor protege program. In addition to that, if you locate a prime contractor that's not currently doing business with Treasury. However, if you're a small business and you locate a prime contractor that's interested in doing business with Treasury, and if you're a small business and you can find a contract that you and the prime contractor can agree on, then I'll still honor that mentor-protege agreement, which means that I'll still include you within our program, and you can go after contracting opportunities within the federal space. And I will also, and lastly, I will also assist you with locating prime contractors who may be interested in getting, small business as yourself to subcontract with them. So,
Thanks.
yes.
Who wants to go next one?
And it's interesting in this city, and particularly because there's so many of us here. I think this is one of the most delicate situations because we've heard nightmare stories of partners stabbing each other in the back, and we've heard great stories of great joint ventures that have worked together. And I know for Enlighten, we sort of use some tests, and I think one is dating, and I think you have to date each other for a while. I tell small businesses all the time, because I've had the nightmare stories of being on some large business team and not getting any work, right? Reality, I've had that. But I didn't date them. They came to us, oh, you're HubZone, oh, you got this qual, you got this certification, come on our team, we'll give you work. And then you win and I don't see them, but I didn't know them. We just read a profile online and says, okay, they swiped and says, I want to date this person. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. And so now I have to do that because it's wasting too much time and money. But I noticed that when I have a relationship with that large and we've dated and they know me and I know them, and I've gotten to know their executives because I do personally ask to meet with the executives of this large business. If they're saying, well, no, Antoine, I don't want you to meet with, then I know it's not quite right, because if you don't want to take the time to meet your business partner, I don't care what size you are, I don't look at that. So I want to meet some of the executives in that particular office, and that's important to me. So I think that's worked out well. I think with smaller partners and partners that are like ourselves, where we're working together, the litmus test has always been proposals, because if there's anything that's going to validate who you are in those late nights on proposals, it's somebody next to me when we're writing. And I will always know is if that person's not with me late nights and blue team, red team, purple team, whatever team we're on, then I know that's not a good partner. And so when it's time to win, I don't want that person again. And so, but I think we've had some great partners that we work together over and over again. I've had partners, honestly, where one individual has left the company, they've gone, one went to GDIT, he took us with him. He said, Antoine, you've been good with us. Every time he's gone different places, he said, I want to bring you with us. And that relationship has grown us in the Intel side. So that's worked out really well.
I wouldn't argue with any of that. I would give you also a litmus test, and that is if they want to date with you, then yeah, you ought to be able to have a sit down, even if it's for 15 minutes, with the senior most executive available in that organization in order to do that, right? Because it is the leaders of the organization who drive the culture of the organization. So what winds up happening is if you aren't afforded that opportunity, you don't know what the organizational culture is that you're about to partner with. You just know the person you met, right? And so it's really important to understand the culture of the organization, because if you're going to be on their team, especially if you're fronting the work, right, that who's behind you, who's got your back, what's going to happen. And I do love the idea about the proposal work. You've probably heard the adage, like, if you want to learn about a person's integrity, play golf with them, right? If you want to learn about a company's integrity, do a proposal with them, right? And understand, where are they on pricing? Where are they on sharing of IP? Where are you on sharing of IP? I'd also like to take this down a slightly different path too, is don't think about the partnering only from the perspective of who you're going to do selling with. As this panel is a lot about the strategies for growing bigger, right? You need to understand the partnerships in every part of the business mechanisms. Who's your banker? Who's your CFO? Who's your CPA? Who's your attorney? Who's your HR go-to? Because those partnerships are every bit as important as what it's going to take me to sell another 2 bodies or 5 bodies. Because if you're going to scale and you're going to be successful and you're going to turn around and be looking over your shoulder, kind of like we are, like, so where are all the smalls that we want to love and be with and all that kind of good stuff? You're going to want to have all of that stuff squared away in your own life too.
To Bob's point, I have a friend of mine who just won some 8A work, and her bank is not with her. So they couldn't scale as fast. Just one great company in the intelligence community, needed to increase the line of credit, bank
Yep.
didn't have a partner.
Yep, yep.
And so now she's in a little bit of a rut. So I made some calls to try to introduce her to another bank.
We did exactly the same thing yesterday to one of the smalls that came into our Shark Tank. Real quick question, how many of you who are out there small have like a 6 or 10 person gig coming up? You know, you're pretty sure you're either the sub to them or you're the prime, and you got 10 people coming in, right? It's going to like double the size of your company, right? I mean, okay, so 45 days from now, if it's 10 people in today's market, you're going to get a bill for something like $140,000 in 30 days. So can you cover it?
Yep.
Is your bank going to go like, I'm with you, let's go? Or are they going to go like, ooh, I got it. Sorry about that, right? So you have to be able to put these kind of relationships in place as well, right? So don't just think about it to sell it. We laugh about it sometimes, go like, you know, the old adage of the dog who catches the bus. You know, been chasing the bus and catches it. So you just landed 10 new bodies, right? Now what? Right? How's it work? And that's part about scaling the company and understanding that you're going to be able to survive in your success, right? Important stuff.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So I could just tell you a couple things from the perspective of a large to tag on to what you're saying, particularly along those other business partners that maybe you guys don't think about as business partners. The strength of your contract shop when we're trying to put together a teaming agreement, that has a huge impact on how a large perceives the capabilities of a small, frankly. Things like banking and financing, very important. You know, we run credit checks, Dun & Bradstreet, all of that kind of stuff happens all behind the scene. You know, when I submit to my department saying, hey, I think I want to do business with this small, you know, even as a VP, I don't make that call. There's a whole organization which is checking you out, right? So having those relationships dependable so that you guys don't get into any sort of trouble like that is really important, and that makes a large, like myself, much more comfortable in doing business and helps further that relationship for sure. So it's a really interesting take. You know, along those lines, once you have those relationships established, I guess, how do you continue them? And do you have any examples of where you've been able to sort of flip those into actual real opportunities and growth strategy? How do you incorporate those relationships into an actual growth platform for your businesses?
Well, absolutely, in as much as we built relationships with several very small companies, even as we were small, right? So in them being able to come to us and go, we'd like to figure out how to do this, but they don't yet either have the expertise or the experience, and Ambit got to where it is because we had great mentors in our life. So we honestly believe that, and just as you did, it is our responsibility to, in this industry, to pay that back. It's not that I'm climbing a ladder and there's nothing. It's that I have to reach a hand back and bring you with us, right? Because one of these days we're going to all retire. You need to be doing this work for the government because it's really important, right? So, so being able to have a small come to us and say like, okay, here's what it is, and us to help shape it and figure out what it is, and maybe even push it to their vehicle instead of our vehicle. Alternatively, we have a relationship with a large that helped us 7 years ago when a piece of work flipped. That team, we have no contractual, it's now been through 2 or 3 recompetes, we have no contractual responsibility, but they're still with us. They still have those 8 people on that team, and that's because that's what the relationships mean, right? And so we're still talking. The relationships are good. Get them to like you, get them to trust you. Never let them down. I mean, we're going to stub our toes, right? Something's going to happen in delivery, and there's going to be a throw up, and the clients are going to get all upset, and those things happen. But how can we, just like a marriage and stuff, like how are we going to be able to work through this thing and get onto the other side and have each other's back and trust?
Yeah, I think we we put together a large joint venture to look at some opportunities at State Department, because one of the issues was, can large businesses do international work? Can small businesses do international work together? And some of the work overseas is typically, well, we don't know if, we know Harris can do it, we know, DynCorp can do it, but can you guys do this together? And so we put together a joint venture and one at IDIQ, because each organization brought together a key qual, and by themselves could they do it? No, but together, and they had worked together, so they had shown, each of us had shown the fact that we were a good team, and I think that those things have worked together well. Even currently with my current protege, what I've done is I've brought him together with two other prospective proteges that I have, and we're looking at how we work together now. And so he's at NSA, the other one has some key areas in HHS, and the other one is growing within some local government. So I'm looking at their quals together and say, well, how can I help you guys in introducing them now together to work together such that we can grow? And then we're looking at, well, I'll introduce them to some of our large business partners where I may not have a certain capacity to do something in a certain area, but they do. So trying to create this sort of ecosystem that we work together with.
Excellent. So Brian, do you have anything to add, or what have you seen from your perspective that works well or doesn't work well?
Well, one of the things I've seen, and it brings me to mind, for a particular small business vendor that met with me one-on-one, provided a lot of good quality information, and I really wanted to help them to grow their business. So I asked the question. I said, can you show me how you grow your business, or have you grown your business over the past few years? And they started to provide information, and they actually had it documented, which is unusual, on how they grew the scale of their business over the past 5 years. So I said, okay. And my supervisor was with me with that. So we asked them to break it up into people, processes, and infrastructure, because my director is a strong supporter of small businesses growing their business. So I asked them to break the sections up into people, processes, infrastructure, and then send it back to me with those 3 areas being outlined and how they specifically invested back into their business in those areas, and they did. They sent the document back to me. Okay, so now the way it works is when I'm out there looking at opportunities and I'm meeting with program managers, and they specifically ask me about a small business who I think can scale up if something happens where they decide to do a BPA and put other organizations within Treasury on the BPA and make it available to maybe a whole bunch of people. If they ask me if I know of an organization who could ramp up their services and provide, this service to a large group of people, I have this particular small business in mind, only because they showed me and demonstrated to me that they already invested in their business, and they also provided me with an outline where they invested in people, processes, and infrastructure. So now I'm willing to argue the point that, they should be considered within Treasury.
Excellent. Kind of playing off a little bit what Brian was just talking about, to have a growth strategy actually written down, right?
Right.
Very important. And I was wondering maybe if we could talk just a little bit about, well, what are the elements of how you grow your business in terms of, I think we talked a little bit about like HR and finance and business partners, but what are those key things that people should think about to get from the sort of micro small to the small to the medium small and where you guys are above now? So you want to kick us off, Bob?
Sure. The basic thing is of identifying, of course, what I'm going to sell to whom and how, right? But that's the easy part. It's kind of hard to do, but that's the easy part. I'm going to sell this to these people by being a sub. I'm going to sell this to these people by being a prime at the lowest possible cost, whatever that is. But what's much more complicated in order to be able to execute and deliver on your strategy, the partnerships we were talking about that scale the business, right? The investments in the infrastructure we were talking about, absolutely huge. So once you have the overall what I'm going to sell to whom and how, that kind of big strategy, and it's got to be reasonable. Like I'm pretty sure, I'm talking goals here, I'm not going to be a tall, thin, blonde Nordic guy tomorrow, right? It's an unreasonable goal. Not going to happen. Well, in the same way, you're probably not going to go from 2 employees to 150 employees next year. If you did, that would be pretty fantastic. It's not going to really happen, right? But there's something else there. But assuming you have the reasonable goal, then the question is, how are you going to? What are the 1,000 decisions you're going to have to make in the governance over those decisions for your small company in order for you to make the right decisions? Not all the time, but most of the time. When are you going to outsource? When are you going to insource? When are you going to go to be a sub? When are you not going to go be a sub? What do you need for a prime, right? Do you have it? It's like a chess game, right? You're constantly directing these dots. So at the end of the game, I will throw this little bit out there. If you're a small and you're thinking, hey, I'm planning to be a large, other than small, sometime here in the near future, look at Alliant 2. Look at the requirements for Alliant 2 and start working the game backwards. Do you have 7 prime contracts in order for you to be able to claim the maximum points? Do you have a cost accounting system? Do you, and that whole list of stuff, not because you want to feel bad about yourself today, you shouldn't, but for you to look out there and go like, wow, that's where the game is. Because the game is changing in terms of how our large UX and IDIQs are changing and things like that, and it's a point-based thing. And so now you start going like, wow, my strategy needs to be aligned to get all of those things in place, right? And then I'm going to make the first of 1,000 decisions today relative to trying to make that happen in my little band of merry players here as we march our way down, right?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and you mentioned something about the plan, right? And so each year, we update what looks like our strategic plan. And it's only as good as like when I finish that day and then it's it. But the fact that I wrote something down really helps. And so we look at factors that affect the business climate. So I'll look at what's happening in the economy, what's happening worldwide. We all should be talking about what's happening politically, because next year is going to change this game for all of us, in one way or the other. I mean, because a lot of our friends are going to be leaving, you know, new appointees, and then so the government changes. And so what does that mean for me as a government contractor? So does that mean, I'll give you an example, in some cases, every time we went through this before, a lot of times people wait until the next appointee comes in. So now, is it batten down the hatches time? Is it balance your portfolio to go somewhere else? So these things we try to think about so that we're able to make decisions and at least proactively look at why we want to do things. And so are we doing something in 2016 because we know 2017 may have some issues with it? And so those types of strategies have helped us anticipate a problem. We will also look at what point do we need to, how do we open up this new line of business? Because we learned a long time ago to stay with the one you're with and kind of date it, but if you can't just, one of the mistakes we made very early was we drilled in the oil field too long. We stayed with this one customer so long, and when that one customer sort of had a cold, we caught pneumonia because we had nothing else. And so we realized, like, wait a minute, we should at least balance our portfolio enough such that we're able to have good partners, as we mentioned earlier. And so a lot of this has to do with thinking a lot about the decisions that you make. And if you don't plan it, I'm not saying it will happen, but if you don't think about it, it's just going to happen to you. And then you'll just be reactive the entire time.
A couple of quick things. Respect and so into the lives of your employees. For me, it's so important to see a small business vendor, whether it's the executive director, chief financial officer, or whether it's a junior IT developer. It's so important to see that the respect goes from top up to bottom down. It's so important to respect. The other thing is for the small business vendors that's in IT specific, keep your creativity. Sometimes with the federal government process and the bureaucracy and all the different things you have to do. A lot of times I think what happens is sometimes the IT firms may lose some of their creativity and just be so engulfed in satisfying our requirements. But make sure to stay passionate. Make sure that you're doing what you really want to do. Because sometimes a small business might get desperate and say, I'm just going to go after this work so that I can pay the bills and so that I can get from point A to point B. But yeah, at the end of the day, when things start getting hard and rough, if you're not passionate about it, then what's going to happen is you're going to get frustrated. And you'll get frustrated at your employees. So these are just some of the things that you need to think about as you go after federal contracts. Also, understand who your competitors are. Understand who are your top 3 competitors. So very important, because a lot of times when you applying for RFPs and things of that nature, your top 3 competitors are going to be right there with you, and you need to be able to speak to your strengths so that you can get to the next level. Finally, I did a panel discussion on the changing landscape and the federal environment. Changing landscape, we talked about cloud computing, we talked about FedRAMP solutions, we talked about business intelligence, we talked about data analytics, we talked about big data, we talked about all those things around IT. You should understand those things. And not that you're going to be the expert in each one of those areas, but you should be able to speak to that in some way, shape, or form. Case example, I'll give you an example. I was at a particular conference, and I was speaking to a young lady that wanted to meet our CIO, or someone within our CIO shop. So I said, okay, before you could meet with this person, they already gave me requirements. They mentioned that they wanted you to be able to be familiar with agile development. They mentioned cloud computing, and of course cybersecurity is very important. I say, well, what do you know about those things? And she was like, well, Brian, I'm a software engineer. She said, I can speak to each one of those things and talk about how my product and services can fit within the realm of the federal space within Treasury. I'm like, you win. So in other words, you don't have to be the expert. You just need to be able to talk enough to get your way through the door. And that says it in a nutshell. So often, the small business vendors are sitting right at the table. And what you need to know is the small business specialists and the analysts, they already spoke to their program managers, so they got certain things that they look for. How do you know what they are looking for? Do your research, do your homework, check beforehand. Because, you know, you can easily kind of craft your capability statement to speak to some specific items that will get you into the door to meet with a program manager. So, and a lot of times, you know, the program managers, they're looking at your capability statement, and if they don't see certain things, you know, and if they're not IT savvy, they may not draw the dots between the lines. So it's so important to do your homework and find out the needs of the organization, and then speak to the needs of that organization within your capability statement, even if you have to do a few minor adjustments.
Excellent. So we have just a few minutes left before we wrap up. I just wanted to pause and see if anybody had any questions from the audience. There's one back there.
We don't have enough time. No.
Yeah. I'll list two for you that I think are really, really important. One is not having enough. You're going to reach a point where you need a lot of really good near real-time financial information about your own operations. It's easy enough to go like, okay, here's what I bid and here's what the general cost is, right? But what's happening in the industry? How are my costs trending? What is the absolute exact net profit after CNA, G&A, overhead, unallowables, and all those kind of good things, right? So what happens, I think, and it happened to us, was you're running along, and people are helping you do that, and then all of a sudden they're not necessarily helping you do that because they've got a problem, and now you've just stymied the business for some amount of time till you roll that all back, and you go like, oh crap, all right, I need to get back in here, right? So my offering to you is you're really focused on the finances when you're really small, right? Because money in and money out are really close, and they're happening almost in the near real time, right? So you've got an eye on this thing. There's a point at which you're going like, hey, we're doing all right here, so I'm going to let somebody else help me with that stuff, right? Don't let that ever get too far out of your hand so that you know what's going on, right? The second thing I'd offer to you is being too late to understand what the culture is you want to have happen, right? And here's my 30 seconds on this. Culture drives operations, especially in the absence of your direct oversight. When you're a small business and you're on site and you're there and you're helping make decisions, then the decision of whether or not to pencil whip this, and I don't mean that, but you know, to turn the other way or accept something that's not quite right or whatever it is, you oversee that every day, right? So it doesn't happen. You're going to become, as you grow and the base gets bigger and the pyramid starts to grow there, where you're not there every day overseeing everything. The culture you have inculcated, you have built, that you have institutionalized into the organization is what will drive the quality and the success of the organization. And if you haven't thought about it, or we haven't thought about it because we've been so busy in the actual delivery and the growing and all that stuff that we forgot that we need to have a core ethics brief, or we need to have a values check, or my ability to bang that drum every day on, you know, my top 3 things for integrity. If that ever slips out of your hand, the results are terrible. Because people have to be removed because they don't fit the team. You have to repair the damage that's been done by their lack of understanding the values and the culture of the organization. So those 2 things I think are really, really important, and they happen almost insidiously as you suddenly grow.
the second one you mentioned was one of my biggest mistakes a few years ago, where you mentioned you took a breath or you kind of relaxed, almost, well, we're good at that. And 2-3 years ago, maybe 4, when you're a small business, you're like everything every day is, you got to get it done. And then we had reached a point where we're like, wait a minute, we're not going to go out of business.
I can take a vacation.
I'm not going out of business. And it hit you for a second, like, I'm not going out of business. And that was the biggest mistake I think we made, because that culture said, we're okay. So the hunger and the passion dripped down to the people. And they said, we're okay. And all of a sudden, I looked around once and I didn't see passion. And I didn't see hunger. And I didn't see what the enlightened culture was all about. You just mentioned it. And I was like, I don't recognize this company. And I saw us, all of a sudden, it was okay not to be great. Yeah, it's good enough. It's
We're good.
okay.
The client likes us.
And I just saw this thing that I didn't like. So that was one of the biggest mistakes, is that so all those people had to leave because they weren't, we call it, they didn't have my DNA. And I was like, this is not my child. Like, mama's baby, daddy's maybe. And these weren't my kids. These weren't, and even though the company had grown, I needed these people to have that culture of passion and hunger and delivery. And that was one of the biggest mistakes, that we relaxed. And I think the other one was very early, where we started to do anything that anyone asked just so we can get a check and some money. And we went to areas that we had no right doing, that wasn't part of who we were, that wasn't our capabilities. We're like, we'll do that, we can do that. And then we didn't deliver, and all of a sudden that cost you your reputation, because that same person was like, well, Antoine, what happened? You guys did such a good job over here. That's not what we do. And we had to learn that all business is not good business. That's not what we do. Bring a partner on board, and so now we're like, if it's not us, hey Bob, can you do this for me?
Absolutely.
Because at that point, I believe in the Godfather. I just did a favor.
That's exactly right. That's what it should be. The thing is, if you scale to be large, you become known for your competency, right? Not just your capability, but your competency. And so the question is, as you scale your company, what's the competency you want to be known for as you bust out of this thing, out of the small?
And I'd rather be an advisor for him. Like, like he says, hey Antoine, can you do this? Now, your instinct is like, no, I can't do that. Hey,
But I know somebody.
I know, hey Fran, can you? And then I introduce him to Fran. I then become, as you mentioned, now I'm a trusted advisor for him. I'm someone that he comes to and says, wait a minute, he isn't just being greedy. He's interested in solving his problem.
Get them like you, get them to trust you.
I like that. Can I use that if I? Okay.
It's free.
So we have elapsed all of our time, and in the interest of keeping us, or ending on time, I'll wrap it up. But I want to thank our panelists for the very interesting discussion. I thought there were a lot of great ideas here. And if you have any questions, feel free to come up afterwards. But